The Assistant is a film that lives in the minutiae of monotony. There is pretty much nothing ceremonious or extravagant, yet it somehow was one of the most thrilling, gripping films I saw last year. How can that be? How can a film that literally watches our protagonist stand blank-faced next to a photocopier be thrilling? How does a film create tension from nothing? Today I'm going to be taking a look at The Assistant. Spoilers ahead. So first off, when I say nothing, what do I mean exactly? Well, our camera is as still as the day is long. I could only count a handful of shots with actual movement, and even then it was mostly very subtle moves. We have music appear in the film twice, at the beginning and at the end. And as I mentioned, the film often shows us the kind of tasks that most other films would just cut out. You could be forgiven for perhaps thinking not a lot happens. It's very much a day in the life of an office assistant. Kitty Green, the director, even said herself,
I was really focused on not the extraordinary, but the ordinary, the stories we could all relate to.
It all feels very observational, which interestingly is an attribute more commonly associated with documentary. Sometimes known as fly on the wall, these documentaries try to have as little impact on the subject as possible. Everyday life without intrusion. So instead of someone like Louis Theroux who takes part in the film, you get something like this.
Hey, yo, turn around, pal.
Sure.
Don't sir me. Don't feed me that sir business.
This isn't all that surprising because Kitty Green actually has a background in documentary herself, and although they haven't been observational, she directed the highly regarded Casting JonBenet. And interestingly, that film's trailer focuses on one word.
Do you know who killed JonBenet Ramsey?
There is a clear deliberate choice here too to show the real side of this world. I've mentioned the tasks, but just to run you through some, we see Jane, our protagonist, turn on the lights around the office, boil hot water for her coffee, unpackage water bottles, print copies of spreadsheets, empty the bins, collect packages. I could go on, and I hope I haven't lost you because I appreciate everything I've said so far almost sounds boring. So how does the tension come in, and why is this film so thrilling? Well, it's all to do with the way Kitty constructed this story. You see, Jane through this film feels incredibly small, and that's not just because she is often dwarfed in the frame with post-it notes, folders and filing cabinets looming above her. Whether it's the boys' club she is excluded from...
Oh, wow.
Who is it?
or the sheer lack of respect her colleagues seem to have for her. Jane's day is relentless, and Kitty decides to show us absolutely everything. Each time we see Jane performing a task, we focus on it for an unusually long amount of time. Seriously, this goes on almost 30 seconds on opening boxes. In this scene, for example, Jane informs a colleague he is going to be flying out to LA, much to his displeasure. And before we can even think about it, Jane is back at the desk, on the phone, new task on the go. It becomes exhausting for us to watch because it's exhausting for Jane. The film commits to this pattern of start, 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 hardly ever getting any respite or resolve or any time to breathe. Usually when writing a story, it's often advised to have your tension ebb and flow, perhaps like this. This way you build drama without overloading your audience, whereas constantly building tension will wear out the viewer. And obviously rules are made to be broken, but the tension pattern in this film more closely resembles this. A Rolling Stone review of the film had the perfect quote, which unsurprisingly was used in the trailer, and for me it encapsulates the whole structure of this film.
Here and here, initial here, sign there.
Do I need a lawyer or something?
Do you have a lawyer?
Discrimination by 1,000 paper cuts. Apart from one scene here or there, we rarely have huge moments of tension build. Instead, Kitty chooses to have it increase steadily, ticking along in the background, almost going unnoticed. So much so that by the end of the film you do feel troubled, conflicted, and emotionally exhausted, but perhaps you're not quite sure how you got there. But just feeling exhausted doesn't make for a gripping film, so what gives? Well, you may already know that the film has unofficially been dubbed the Harvey Weinstein film, and I purposefully haven't mentioned it till now because I think it's better not to know. I was lucky enough to watch the film in cinemas last year, and I knew nothing about the plot. To be honest, I'm just a big fan of Julia Garner's, so when I saw she was in this film, I just wanted to see it, so I went in completely blind. Knowing beforehand that there is going to be a predatory boss figure may give you a feel for what is to come in the movie, but not knowing was fantastic because Katie Green does not hold your hand at all in this film. There is nothing overtly obvious about what is going on until perhaps maybe the end. And I don't think this is necessarily a bad thing, I think this is amazing storytelling. Firstly, we never actually see the boss. He is a presence that looms over the film and over Jane, but we never see him. We see an earring on the floor of his office, which is later picked up by a young female, and we never hear anything about it again. We hear the production assistants joking about not sitting on the couch.
Never sit on the couch.
And we're left to figure out why that is. And when asking about blank checks, Jane is told,
ignore it.
Okay, and will he know what it's for?
Yep.
Okay.
and that's all we know about them. Of course you can figure it out, but Kitty chooses to go with subtlety. Remember before I mentioned observational documentary? Everyday life without intrusion. That's exactly what's going on here. Kitty gives us everything we need to figure it out for ourselves without needing this big pointy arrow saying predator here. The long, exhausting day is peppered with troubling instance after troubling instance, and then a fresh-faced, seemingly underqualified young woman turns up from Idaho. She's a new assistant and is to be put up in a fancy hotel. A hotel we find out the boss has just gone to.
Where'd you take her?
What?
The girl, where'd you take her?
The Mark.
Mark.
We know it and Jane knows it too. Something is not right here. And this is where we get closest to a traditional climax and where we get our biggest bump in tension. Jane nervously heads down to the Human Resources Department to speak up about what she is seeing. The long shots feel even longer here. This is the first time the film gives us a chance to reflect on everything we've seen. We haven't jumped back into another task, we're just left to wait. And when Jane does enter the office, it really does feel like a safe space. Matthew Macfadyen's character Wilcock really feels like he is there to listen and help Jane.
Whatever's going on, you can tell me, that's what I'm here for.
Finally, right, the film offers us a glimpse of hope. But slowly, line by line, we realise the smiling exterior of Wilcock is covering up something much more sinister.
And here you are, sitting in my office, stressed out, jealous of some new assistant who's getting more attention than you.
And he's just really another cog in the machine.
I was worried for this girl.
She's a woman. She's a grown woman.
The film had lulled us into a false sense of security.
Tell me what you want me to do here.
Which makes this realization all the more crushing. There is no safe space. Our wide shots have tightened into close-ups. Jane is literally being trapped inside the frame as Wilcock leans in closer and closer, casting doubt in her head.
What do you want from me?
And as we process this, we break for the first time from the shot-reverse shot the scene had been following.
I do.
This is the all is lost moment of the film. What we effectively learn here from this one shot is that the answer is to wipe away your tears, forget your worries, and get on with it, even in the face of despicable things. Once more, we have a moment to reflect. There's a very distinct feeling of stillness to this shot, and it stands out because we haven't seen anything like it the whole film. And it stands as Jane's moment of realization that to progress in this industry, she has to ignore the toxicity and abuse and even become a part of the machine that literally prints out women for an evil abuser. There's another 20 minutes of this film and the problems don't stop here. Much like the tasks we see Jane performing, the film offers us no resolve. We don't get to see the happy ending or indeed any real ending at all. Instead, what we see is just the end of the day, knowing it's all to come again tomorrow. Kitty Green sets up the viewer for a long shift in one of the most relatable job roles possible, and with barely any time to reflect, each little scratch begins to pile up and become overwhelming until the viewer is left in a state of exhaustion and confusion. It would have been very easy to make a visceral thriller showing the much darker side of workplace toxicity and abuse, but in an industry where that's already so glamorized, she chose to show it like a fly on the wall, letting us, the viewer, see it for ourselves. Kitty mentions that the banality of evil was on her mind when making the film.
The banality of evil was like the focus, and also this idea that abuse is sort of utterly ordinary. Like there's nothing sexy about it.
If you aren't familiar, the phrase was coined after World War II by Hannah Arendt during the trial of a high-ranking Nazi SS officer who claimed to just be following orders. She noted how ordinary he seemed. It's a big topic of discussion, but it gave light to the idea that ordinary people can be led to perform evil acts. There was even a whole study on this called the Stanford Prison experiment. And while no one is saying the boss in this film is ordinary or not responsible for his actions, it shines a light on all the other people who are worn down by the machine and become the glue to a system that keeps an evil figure in power. And I think that's what makes this film so tense. It's not a glamorized Hollywood film about a glamorized Hollywood lifestyle. It's all very real and relatable, which makes it all the more horrifying. And after what feels like a long, exhausting, troubling day, the credits roll, and you're left in the dark. Another rare chance to reflect. This time though, you're left to consider your own actions in your own life, and hope you've not become a glue keeping together a broken system. Thank you so much for watching, and just before you go, please do give the video a like and subscribe to the channel if you did enjoy it. But most importantly, I'd love it if you could leave a comment letting me know what you thought of The Assistant, the film, because I think there's a lot to be taken from it, and I honestly really enjoyed it. I think it's a fantastic film, and I can't wait to see what Kitty Green does next. And please do give some feedback on the video if you enjoyed it or didn't enjoy it, or any points you agreed with or don't agree with. I'd really like to know what you guys thought, because I'd love to have a conversation with you guys. That's kind of why I'm doing all of this, because I just like talking about films, so it'd be nice to talk about films with other people who like them. Thank you again for watching, and enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye.